Welcome to Let's Talk Near Death, the podcast show that talks about life, death, and experiences somewhere in between. I'm Kirsty Salisbury, the host of the show, and I hope you'll join me as I chat to everyday people with not so everyday experiences. You may also wish to join the conversation over in the Let's Talk Near Death online community, which is found at www.letstalkneardeath.com. Membership is free, or you're welcome to upgrade to join the live VIP events, to gain early access to episodes, or to receive extra VIP bonus material. Your support helps me to continue to get episodes out and to help grow the conversation around these types of experiences. But before then, let's talk near death.
But when I was 50, I had a dream that I was going to die suddenly. And what it was I could see myself in a hospital room and I was looking down on my body. And I was really shocked. I was really surprised. And I was like, oh, am I dead? How did I get here? And I kept thinking, they don't even know I'm dead.
Hello and welcome back to the Let's Talk Near Death podcast. Today I'm having a conversation with someone who has had a likely near-death experience, a shared death experience, and somebody who has some amazing connection to, I'm going to say, the angelic realm, to spiritual realm, has always felt led and guided in this area. And it's going to be a really interesting conversation, I'm sure. So today I am chatting with Asta Lander, who's based in Western Australia. Asta is an artist and she has the most incredible art drawing archangels, which we will show you some little glimpses of and be able to share those with you. And Asta had an experience very, very early on in life, which I'm sure she will share with us today. So Asta, welcome to the show. It's fabulous to have you here. Take us back. I know there's quite a few things going on in your life. What brought about the start of these experiences?
So we came out from Scotland on a working holiday and we spent a year in Australia and from Scotland. And then we were on a boat going back to Scotland and I got really ill. I got measles. And while my mum was trying to bring down my temperature, she blames herself for me getting pneumonia. So they docked the ship in Southampton and carried me off, and I was in hospital for at least a month. And my memories are very vague. I do remember my grandmother, I think it was my grandmother, pushing me in one of those great big old-fashioned prams, the big black prams with the big wheels, and through the garden. I remember being tipped, the bed being tipped, so I think they must have been banging on my back to remove the fluid in my lungs. I remember daily needles. I think they were daily because they seemed a lot in my bottom, so I had a bit of a phobia of needles. Yeah, but during that time, my brother, they were doing randomized tests on siblings, and they discovered that my brother had a heart condition, and he was a baby. He was 16 months old. So my mother's attention went on to my brother. My father had to find some work, so I guess my dad was probably reasonably absent. I think I was mostly with my grandmother, but my grandmother's no longer alive. So I don't really know what happened to me in that time, but I do remember the big room. I remember my brother being in the corner. But when I was 50, I had a dream that I was going to die suddenly. Well, that's what I thought it was. So I told my family, I prepared everybody, it's a premonition, I'm going to die suddenly. It was really disturbing for me because it was so obviously it was very real for me, or I wouldn't have said it to people. And what it was I could see myself in a hospital room and I was looking down on my body. I was up at the ceiling looking down on my body. I could see nursing staff, doctors, nurses. And I was really shocked. I was really surprised. And I was like, oh, am I dead? How how did I get here? Like it was not a very nice experience. And so if this is a memory from my childhood, I can understand why I would have suppressed it. I could see glass windows outside, and I could see people who loved me. So I don't know if they were actually there, but I could see people who loved me who would be affected by me dying. And I kept thinking they don't even know I'm dead. Such a strange thought. Yeah. So when I've asked Mum, did I stop breathing? She says, well, I don't know, because I wasn't with you all the time, and I know her attention went, which I understand, went from me onto this baby who needed heart surgery. And it's so long ago now that there'll be no records. I won't be able to validate what actually happened. But I'm 58 now, but as time has gone on, I feel like I'm remembering things. So I started drawing, only recently I started drawing elf angels, and they feel an expression of something that I have encountered. They are very real to me. And I feel they're around me, that they love me, and they're always been with me. More and more I'm feeling that I'm surrounded by them. And then I'm meeting people who are saying to me, they look like the light beings I encountered when I had my near-death experience. So I don't know, are those people my soul family that have experienced that, or do lots of people have these light beings that surround them? I don't know. And when I was younger, I used to draw angels on my wall in my bedroom with chalk just on my blue walls, and I find that really odd because I don't come from a background where angels were talked about. We were quite strict Protestants, really, so we didn't have that sort of thing. Yeah, and then I'm looking at photos of myself where I'm touching angel statues and I'm feeling them, and there's just something about angels in me. And more I'm starting to collect angels, and they're just becoming important to me. And also recently I realised that I was told at my birth I had the cord around my neck several times. So I must have been a blue baby, as my son was also a blue baby. He also had, one of my sons also had the cord around his neck. So I wondered too, did something happen then that made me more connected with the angelic realms? When I asked Mum, did we used to go to church regularly, she says, yes, when you made us, which I think is hilarious because they are religious people. They're much more religious than I am, but I was always searching for that home where where those things would fit. It's only dawned on me recently that I had a terrible fear of eternity as a child. Now, I think that is weird.
What do you mean by that? That's different to a fear of death, isn't it? So
yeah,
can you expand on that?
Yeah, well, maybe it's the way that eternity is portrayed in the church when I was a child. Like I thought it was going to be really boring. I thought they were going to wear really boring clothes, the robes, which I thought were terribly boring, and they're just going to float around and do nothing important. So I'm just like, I don't want a life where I'm just kind of just floating around doing nothing. It felt more important to be here. But maybe that's because perhaps I was told that it was more important to be here now. I don't know, but I did have fear of eternity. Yeah. But not a fear of, I don't remember being afraid of death, other than afraid of losing people I love, or if a pet died or something like that.
Yeah. So what you said that you were quite, gosh, how do I put this? As a child, you were quite interested in spiritual things. You were drawing the angels. You said you drew blue angels. You were dragging your family off to church, things like that. Is that from day one, pretty much? Is that as long as you can remember that you always had this underlying interest in things like that?
Yeah. And a connection with nature, deep connection with nature. I'm still, I mean, you could think my doctor thinks I'm borderline ADD, so I probably am. I only found that out when I told him one of my sons said, well, I think you're borderline ADD. And she said, oh, actually, Asta, I've always thought that about you. I just have a lot of joy for simple things. So, you know, at the moment, the butterflies are out, and not one butterfly will escape my notice, or dragonflies, or yesterday I took photos of 2 Christmas beetles mating. I just cannot believe they let me get so close and have these astonishing photos. And, you know, like the sound of the water, because we've got waterfalls near us in winter, they just delight me. The colours of the leaves on the trees, you know, we're on 3 acres in Margaret River, so it's this, I was just looking out the window the other day saying to my husband, have you noticed all the different colours of green? Like, you know, so I'm in awe of a lot of things. And then my heart always feels very much for animals. You know, I can't stand, I'm vegan, I can't stand the suffering of animals. And I never could. And like, we had puppies, our female dog had puppies, and my dad would always remove the farms, you know, back then. They would remove the puppies, and I'd be begging him to save the puppies. So then I became an animal rescuer. Later in life, I could. I've rescued lots of dogs, lots of animals. Yeah.
Wow, I'm not surprised at all. After the short time that I've known you, I'm not surprised to hear that. So you've had this from day one. You then had this experience. How old were you when you got the measles?
4.
Okay, so quite early on, and you have the memories of the hospital, the memory of being outside of your body.
That was when it was 50 when I remember seeing outside of my body. But I don't think it is a premonition. I think it's a memory. So basically I contacted someone. I'm trying to think of the short version. Someone who recognised something in my art. She contacted me and asked me if I'd had a shared death experience, which I did at the time of my father's death, but I didn't have the language for that because I didn't know about shared deaths. And then through that, when I started to wonder, was I having memories, I contacted her, and she put me onto Nicole Brewer, who a lot of us know and admire deeply. And I spent an hour talking with her, and she said, just let's accept the fact that most likely you've had a near-death experience. And I am missing a vital part, actually. It's a bit woo-woo, a bit strange, but that's okay.
That's okay.
So since COVID, you know, I think a lot of us, our giftings are starting to come out more. I don't know if we're spending more time alone, or I've been alone most of the time this year. My husband's been working away, and I'm in a new place. I don't know what it is, but I started exploring mediumship, and so I'm in a development circle, and we meet like 3 times a week on Zoom. We've been doing it actually before COVID, so over a year now. And in that group, usually if we bring someone forward, there's someone that we will recognise. But in this case, a lady brought forward a grandfather with a 4-year-old girl who had died from measles. And no one recognised her. And I said, well, I can recognise her, but I'm not dead. That was so weird. And the girl that had done that contacted me, and she said, I'm concerned. I feel like part of you is stuck. So that's when I ended up talking to Nicole and saying, is it possible that I've had a near-death experience and part of me has got stuck? And she was saying, well, wouldn't that be kind of like a safe place to be sort of stuck, you know, with your grandfather? And the grandfather was coming forward saying, it's time for you to go, sort of thing. You know. That was the feeling this girl got. And and so I had this lovely conversation with her, and she said to me, Asta, what would make little you feel safe to come back? And I said, fairies. So I went to the shop about 15 minutes away from here, and I bought myself a fairy. I loved fairies as a child. Fairies and angels is really interesting. And I just see there's such an overlap between them. So I bought myself a fairy, and I went to a cafe, and a little girl walked in, and I said to her, "You look so much like my fairy I just thought, would you like to see her?" As I do. And her father was distracted and ordering something. And so I opened up my fairy and she was delighted, face lit up. And I said, I'd really love to call my fairy after you. What's your name? And her name was Astrid. My name is Asta.
Oh,
and,
wow.
And Asta comes from Astrid. And when I said, "How old are you?" she put up 4 fingers. And I'm like, I just named a fairy after me. It was really, it was really special.
That gives me like not quite goosebumps, but that blows my mind. It really does. It's so beautiful. I don't know if you're familiar with Dr. Lottie, who's also been on the podcast. She talks about how after her near-death experience, she's had a couple of them actually. After her near-death experience, it's like a piece of a jigsaw. You know when you do a jigsaw puzzle, and often there's one piece, or if it's the last piece, and you put it in, it's just like the lip sticking out. It doesn't quite fit in perfectly. She talks about how after her near-death experience, she felt a little bit like that there was just a little piece of her that couldn't fit back in, and it was still connected to something else. And as you're talking, I was reminded of that and thinking, oh, this is quite similar. I've heard other people talk about how they don't quite come back, like it's part of them is left behind, or they can't quite absorb back into the life how they used to. So as you were talking, I was thinking, oh, this, it's the same thing in a different format. I absolutely love it. Meeting that 4-year-old girl just blows my mind, because I know already that your name is coming from the name Astrid. So 4 years old with the fairy, the reason you went to buy the fairy is to try and release yourself. Blows my mind.
And it was astonishing, because I actually really felt like God was with me that day, like it was really helping me to heal, because another little girl came in. It was such a strange experience. It was mind-blowing. Another little girl walked in, and with her father as well, after this little girl had gone. And I have to explain, where I'm sitting is right next to the counter. So it's not like I'm grabbing children from corners of the room.
Yeah.
And their fathers are distracted because they're ordering food. And so this little girl, I asked her what her name was, and I couldn't hear it, and then the father said her name is Piper. And I miscarried a little girl, I believe it was a girl, and we named her Piper. And then I just felt like, whoa, 2 parts of me that really needed healing, because I always grieved so much for that little baby. And it was suddenly like, whoa, it's sort of like, can't explain it. It was another part of my healing happened in that moment. Then I had to go to the toilet, and then I had to just say, okay, God, okay, I'm good.
Yeah.
Enough already. Yeah.
Wow. Talk about little miracle moments. That's amazing.
She was 4 as well.
Oh, she was 4 as well. Oh, gosh. It's just, my heart is, I just feel blessed listening to this. Tell us about your shared death experience. Are you happy to do that?
Yeah. Yes, I'd love to. So I'd love to show you the painting, but I can't work out how to do it. I did a painting of my father's hands after he died. It's really significant, so perhaps I could show you at the end or something. When my dad was dying, I took over the caring for him. Mum had looked after him during the year. He had pancreatic cancer, and my mother had had a very difficult experience with her father dying with her as a child. And Mum is not good with death. She's good. She's got a very strong faith and everything. It's just the end process is very scary for her. Yeah. So I stayed with them, and I was sleeping on the floor beside him. And I always knew the whole time. So there was like 8 days, no food, no water before he died. Before that was a few days, so maybe I was there about 2 weeks or something. I knew I was going to see something significant, and that I had to be with him. So I only left in that time. I left for half an hour because the nurse sent me home to see my dogs. Because I was missing my dogs. I raced in, gave them all hugs. I had 3 dogs at the time and 2 cats. And then I raced back again. I was just terrified I'd miss this moment. Yeah, that's quite significant actually, because I almost did miss this moment. Anyway, on the day that he died, the morning that he died, it was a difficult night. It was quite laboured in his breathing, and it was a very difficult night. But I fell asleep in the end beside him. And when I woke up, he'd stopped breathing. And I just said, casual as day, "Oh, Dad, I'm so sorry. I missed it." It was just, I think life and death had become so normal by then for me.
Right. Yeah.
And so I held his hand, and he started to, well, he took this enormous deep breath, and then he started to move his hands. And he'd been in a coma. I'd been moving his arms, moving his legs, his nappies, you know, like it was the end of life. And he just started, he held his fingers, I'm trying to see if you can see them, like this, but pointing like this. And then he was lying back, and he just pointed to the ceiling. And such strong arms, he just lifted them up like this, and I'm holding his hand, and I'm like, "Dad, what are you doing?" It was like incredible. And now that I'm realizing that I do have some psychic ability and mediumship ability, the way that I see it is in my mind's eye. So whilst I didn't see golden light, in my mind's eye, I saw golden light. So, and I know that because I painted that. So in the week following, I was playing this old Christian music that I loved the whole entire week. I wouldn't let anyone come into the room, and they were only allowed to see it in the reflection in the mirror. It was so sacred to me. And I painted that moment. And then a year later, on Easter Monday, I shared it on social media to give people hope of life after death, because it was profound. But the reason that it feels like a shared experience for me is because what I had never told anybody was, it's like Jesus, God, something sacred co-opted my dad's body, cohabited my dad's body. I can't explain it. I felt like I had an encounter with something. A bit of my dad was still there, but the sign, it was like a sign or a blessing, came from the divine. And his eyes were different. My dad's eyes weren't blue, but I remember thinking the eyes were blue. And I've only had one other time that I can remember where I helped a man who was an alcoholic or a drug addict. And it turned out he was quite a violent man, but I had driven him home. And as he got out of the car, he said, "What's your name, mate?" And looked at me. And his eyes, I swear, were the eyes of Jesus. And I don't know if Jesus had blue eyes. He probably didn't have blue eyes.
Wow.
It's just how I remember them. I remember thinking stopping and looking at his eyes, thinking they were different. And there was one experience in the time when my dad was dying where he came out of the coma for a day, and we moved him and put him in front of the window. And he was really different. He just had this beautiful love in his eyes. There was no earthly worries in my father. And he was looking out the window and in absolute awe of the clouds, the sky. He just lay and looked at it. And then when he looked at us, I remember him looking at my husband with this utter, unconditional love. I mean, my husband is not his flesh and blood. And I know he respected and loved my husband, but there was love that went beyond the earthly love that I saw in my father's eyes for my husband. And he did the same for me. And I was saying to my brother, did you see that? He goes, yeah. I don't think he saw what I saw, quite what I saw. But he was happy for me that Dad was showing me such great love, but it was more than my father. So I feel a relief that this beautiful, I think her name's Pauline, that this beautiful lady asked me that question, have you had a shared death experience? Because then it gave me some sort of language or some sort of understanding that there is something other than our loved one in those moments. So, and I have a deep love of Jesus, and a lot of my understanding of the spiritual world because of my upbringing. Perhaps it's just how I view it because of the way that I grew up. But I just always feel that I have God and Jesus around me. Yeah. And I did have an experience in a medium. I went to a spiritualist church, and I had a really strange experience where I felt Jesus stand behind me. And it was the weirdest thing because my concept since my dad died of God has expanded so much bigger than I can explain. And so when I was sitting there and I could feel this Jesus, he was enormous. Like he felt like he was going right up to the roof. And I'm thinking, wow, Jesus is really big. And when she was doing the sort of readings, she came to me and she said, you feel an ascended, that was her wording, ascended master standing behind you. And I thought, yes, I do. And she goes, oh, and I can feel what you're feeling. It's like all warm. And so I always remember that he's standing there, he's behind me and supporting me. And I've had that experience as well of feeling, and I don't share this, but I will share this. I've had this experience where I have felt him heal through my hands. So I was able to put my hands on my husband when he had swollen legs after an infection in his leg, and we could actually see his leg change. So I took photos of it because it was quite, look at the difference in the leg. And my husband's a skeptic. Yeah. So, but something was going on, and I didn't tell him. Actually, I think it's Jesus sending this energy through my hands. And I'm not a Reiki master or anything like that. So yeah.
Wow, I love that. Your experience with your father, having been with him at the end of his life on his deathbed, having that shared death experience there where you saw this beautiful light and he raised his arms up. What do you think that's taught you about death and the end of life?
What has it taught me? I have, like a lot of people, no fear of death for myself. Yeah. Only fear of grief, because grief is very real. So it didn't take away. It didn't take away from my grief, but it kind of did, because I had that sense of knowing that Dad was absolutely where he thought he was going. I don't think it looks like he thought it was going to look. I think it's much more expansive than my dad's doctrine would have allowed him to believe. But definitely, I don't worry about that. I feel, I don't know how to explain it, but I feel within that moment it wasn't that he was going because he believed this doctrine. I believe that everybody will experience the same offer of love. I'm not sure everyone takes the same offer of love. They might need a bit of help to get to that place, to that full embracing of that love. But I do feel that everybody is met by something that I hear too many stories that are similar, where they see people around them. And I expected his mother to come get him, and I actually told Dad that, which is kind of strange because my dad probably wouldn't believe those things, but I kept saying, I think that Gran's going to come and meet you. I did also ask him to send me a sign, because I said to him, you're going to be in heaven before me, send me a sign. So perhaps that was a sign. I don't know. And then I have had a dream. I had a dream where it was I would say it's a dream visitation with my dad. And I've been thinking about this, knowing that you were going to interview me, where I actually asked him if I could see him again. And I had seen him before. This was another time. In my sleep, I saw him at a window, and I just said, "Oh, there you are." Just like when I was like, "Oh, what are you doing, Dad?" You know, like it's just so strange.
Totally normal.
I know, so weird. And then I was sitting on his lap, and I had to make a choice, and it was very loving embrace. My father was a very huggy man, and he'd call me sweetheart and give me a hug, and it was quite beautiful. Anyway, I was sitting on his lap, and basically he said, you can stay here, which is really interesting when I hear about near-death stories. You can stay here, and it will be like this, and that's okay, it's a choice, or you can go. But you need to make a decision, because you can't be lingering around here all the time. You have to make a choice. So I remember removing my hands off him, and it was like gravity was pulling my hands. Like it was like the hardest thing to remove my hands off my dad. And I removed my hands off him, and then I walked away. And sometimes I regret that because I really would like to have another dream like that, or something. And I've not had another dream like that. That's not true, actually. I've had one other dream. And his message was that he wanted me to live my life. They were his words to myself and to another family member. And he wanted me to say the message to this other person. And this was the message to us. I want you to live your life. So, yeah. But I often think of that great love. And he said, I'm still here. I'm still here. It's not like he's gone away. I have just gone to live my life, but he is still there. So,
and do you still have that feeling? You talked about how you felt like there was this impending death, you were going to die, it was going to be sudden, you got everybody ready for it. Do you still have that sort of feeling? Is that maybe what he was referring to is you've got to choose?
Oh,
it's a big question, right?
Hadn't thought of that one.
Is there some element, I'll rephrase it, is there some element, do you think, where maybe you are still in two worlds almost? You haven't quite fully come back into where you are now, and he's saying you need to choose.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, because I live very much in the spiritual world.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's true. I have a foot in either side. I'm not very grounded, and so I try to ground myself.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I've had a lot of people say, you need to just be a bit more grounded. I'm thinking, if only you knew.
I know, and I met a lady someone said that to me in front of this lady, and she said, it was beautiful what she said, actually. She said, it's very difficult being an angel.
Oh, wow.
And I don't know why she said that. I get the feeling she's experienced something herself. I have no idea. But she does believe in fairies and all that sort of thing. But I just have this feeling that she understood how hard it can be. And something I've noticed, and I don't know if you've noticed, is a lot of people who have psychic abilities or had near death seem to have migraines or had migraines. So I was a chronic migraine sufferer from 9. And to the point where in high school, the doctor came up and gave me a morphine injection in the sick bay without my mother's permission. Yeah, yeah. So back in those days when they did those strange things, but I had an out-of-body experience, and I always thought it was the drugs that did that.
That was for the migraines? You had the out-of-body experience back when that happened?
Yeah, so I don't know, is that what normally happens when people have drugs? Do they have out-of-body experiences? I don't know.
Who knows? It's probably not uncommon. I don't know if it's related directly. What was that like for you? What was the out-of-body experience?
Fantastic.
Yeah.
It was fantastic. I had no pain, and I was aware of my body, but I was not of my body. So it wasn't like being from the roof looking down, but somehow I knew my body was there, but I wasn't of my body. It felt really freeing, felt really natural. It felt my natural way of being. And I really liked it. And I think perhaps I could have turned into a drug addict had my dad not sort of said no. The last time I had a severe migraine, it was my dad and I were in the city, and I said, "You've got to take me to the doctor so I can have morphine." And he said, "No." Yeah. And pretty much my migraine stopped after that, so which was interesting. I've only had a couple of times where I've had visual disturbances, and even then I've actually even wondered, was that even like the room shifting around me? It's a kind of strange feeling, kind of glittery and altering. But yeah, interesting.
It is so interesting, Asta. I don't know. I mean, there's so much in there. We've covered quite a lot in the last little, I don't know how long we've been talking, half an hour or so. So we've covered you had the cord around your neck a couple of times at birth. We've covered that you had this episode of measles at age 4. age 50, you felt like this impending feeling you're going to die, prepared the family that you were going to die, and then you had this experience where you understood, or you saw yourself outside of your body having this memory, I suppose. Is that correct? The memory of the 4-year-old having a near-death experience?
When I was 50, yeah.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
I was going to say, I don't have the fear of sudden death. Part of me wonders now, was it a premonition, you know, or was it a near death? Because I can't be certain of what it is, but I think it's most likely near death. And so that took away a lot of that fear that I had. And I didn't have a fear of sudden death. I was really worried about how that would impact on the family, but mainly because I could see my loved ones in that, you know, in that dream that I had, or memory. I could see my loved ones, and they didn't even know I was dead, and I didn't want them to go through that. Plus, my mother's father died suddenly, and my husband's mother died suddenly. My mother's father, my husband's mother. I didn't want them to have to go through something like that. So now I can say, oh, it's okay, it's just a near-death memory.
Yeah. How did they respond to that? How did your family take that on board?
I think my mum thinks that's a bit weird.
Yeah,
you know,
still.
Yeah. Well, she doesn't know about near-death stories. It's not in her, you know, just not in her knowledge really that can happen. But I tried to say to her, I did say, did I stop breathing? And she just can't tell me. She doesn't know, but she does say, you were a very gravely ill little girl. So that's some version of you were very sick, and it could have happened. Yeah.
Now, what about your husband? What did he say when you said, hey babe, I think I've potentially had a near-death experience when I was younger? How do you respond to that when you've been married to somebody for a while and they've never brought that up before?
Actually, my husband and my children are so accepting of me, because I've always been I've always expanded spiritually, and I just say what I think, and I suppose I'm very childlike in many ways, and I'm quite a puppy. So they're sort of like, oh, it's just mum. There's another thing, you know, like So they just accept me for me. So in fact, they always bring me down to ground, because they're sort of like, oh yeah, so you had a near death, like, you know, like. I'm like, no, but I had a near death. I think, you know, like, yeah.
Oh wow, that's amazing. I think my family are a little bit the same. They're like, oh, just another thing. But you know, that's how we are. That's how we are. Has your fear of eternity dissolved?
Yeah, because I don't think it's going to be boring.
No, I don't think so.
No, and I think I'd actually rather be there. So it's it's very different now. Very. Yeah. Well, I have a different view. I haven't been calling myself a Christian lately, and Megan Waterson has written a book called something about Mary Magdalene, and I've been listening to her audiobook. She quotes Chesterton, who said, there's a Christianity we haven't yet explored, or something like that, were his words. That's my feeling. It's so much bigger than the doctrine that I have explored through my life through the Christian church. So, and because it's expanded, I find it more exciting. The whole concept of life after death is like, you know, and do we have multiple lifetimes? And, you know, do we have soul family? And, you know, it's not just the pearly gates and the people in the robes, you know, like, so nothing wrong with the robes. I actually like them now.
Yeah.
But I'm in my 50s now. I'm not like a teenager, you know, like.
Oh, how things change, right?
I know.
Yeah. I don't think it's going to be boring whatsoever. I think it's quite exciting. And like you say, I love thinking about life after death and all of these topics. You've raised quite a few right then. Do we have multiple lives? There's so many questions that we can get into, and I find the topic so big, so exciting, and kind of a bit left field as well. People do look at me a little bit, but there's so many topics that we could get into. I want to ask you about your alpha angels, your drawings, because I've seen some of them and they are absolutely stunning. Were they something that you've always drawn, or was that a defining moment when something happened and you started to draw them, or where did they come from?
Yeah, that's fascinating, because I don't know what started them, except I remember I drew my prototype of them, which was just these really simple little drawings, just a simple pencil drawing to express emotions. So there was like a sad one, or one holding, and they usually always end up holding something, which is fascinating. It was great love. And then I put them on Instagram, and I noticed that people could relate to these figures. And then they just naturally blossomed into my elf angels. And that's when I started wondering, are they a knowing? Do I actually know the elf angels? Do I actually know them? And then, so they went from the sort of prototype to, I would add wings. I don't necessarily think they have wings, I'm not sure. Because I felt like I needed to, so people knew that they were otherworldly, that they were spiritual. Sometimes they have a halo, but also if they're expressing something, there's always a message in them. And an elf angel might also demonstrate, they might be us, they might be a human and the divine. So they might both have wings. One might have a halo, which would indicate that's definitely the divine. It's so hard to explain. They feel, and I'm so reluctant to use this word, but anyway, they feel channeled.
Yeah.
They feel, all these words that are becoming so trendy that I'm reluctant to use them, but the download, the channels, the whatever, I can't.
Yeah.
They are divinely inspired. And then what I noticed is people will treasure them. So I started making little zines, little booklets, and they will keep them in their handbag, and they keep them beside the bed, or they take them for their chemotherapy. And I did make worry dolls out of them for a while, and lately I started doing paper clay elf angels onto sticks and things. I'm trying to explore a way of expressing them 3D. I started to learn to felt, so I've done some felt angels just for Christmas, but I've now got some plant fibre coming, and I'm going to experiment and see if I can do more with the elf angels. I've started doing watercolours of them so that they become more 3D. So, and this was my first. I always like to show this one, but I don't know if you can see it.
We can see that. Probably what I'll do is put a photo of it into the Facebook page or something like that, especially as we have a lot of listeners who can't necessarily see it. They're on an audio only version. But yeah, beautiful. I love your angels, your elf angels. I just think they're so beautiful. And that's what really attracted me to finding out more about what you're doing, what your experiences are. I love to find the stories behind people and why they do what they do. So Asta Lander, thank you so much. I've so enjoyed just having a natter with you and finding out more and learning about all of these things that have taken place to put you where you are today and where these elf angels have come into the picture. We'll put some links to them. We'll put some photos of them. But I want to say thank you so much for sharing a little bit more of you.
Thank you. It was such an honour. It was lovely. I love talking about the elf angels because they're very special. And I do feel the more people that see them, the more they're able to reach out in love from divine source. They are special, and they're not of me, is what I'm trying to say. I am the vehicle. Yeah.
I love that. We're going to post some photos and get them out there so everybody can see them because they're beautiful.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining me for another episode of the Let's Talk Near Death podcast. Don't forget you can join the free online community over at www.letstalkneardeath.com, and I look forward to sharing another episode with you soon.